Hey everybody, welcome back. This is 1.2 Points, Lines, and Planes. Feel free to pause to complete the do now and then resume the video when you want to check your accuracy. You are drawing a line from each net in column A to its 3D figure in column B. So feel free to pause now and resume the video to check your answers. Column A, the first one you see is a square base with the sides of 4 triangles. If you were to fold that net into a 3D figure, it would turn into your pyramid. Oops. Your second image has a rectangular base with circles on the side. If you were to fold your rectangular base around the circles, well, that would create your cylinder. And the last one, you have several rectangles with rectangular sides. And if you were to fold that back up into a 3D figure, that would give you your rectangular prism. Okay, so for your vocabulary terms, feel free to pause when you write the definition, pause when you're drawing the definition, and pause when you're naming the definition. Okay, feel free to take as much time as you need to accurately draw, name, and write down these definitions. A point indicates a location and has no size. Indicates a location and has no size. So fill in the red words on your definition. If you were to draw a point, it is simply a point labeled with a letter. If you were to name this point, it would simply be point A. Okay, most of the time, you would write point A. A line is a straight path extending in 2 directions infinitely, meaning they go on in both directions forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. If you were to draw a line, it would look just like this. Notice how it has several points located on the line itself, but the most important part is these arrows. Those arrows mean that they extend infinitely. They will run forever and ever and ever, meaning these lines will go all the way. Notice they also have a letter here, L, in script, but it does not have a point associated with it. That's because you can name your line a given letter, such as this one. So how can you name a line? Well, we just said it. It's going to be line AB. Notice how above the letters A and B, you have your extended line with your arrows. You could also do the reverse of this and call it line BA. Or simply, like we just talked about, you can classify a line given a distinct letter, like line L, right there. A plane is a flat, 2-dimensional surface. Okay, this picture may take you a little while to draw, so feel free to pause. If you were to draw a plane, it would look something like this. Your plane is your light blue here, and notice that it has points contained within it. And again, just like our line had a L associated with it, this time we have a P with no point associated with the plane. So how can you name this plane? Well, there's several ways you could do it. The first being plane P. You just take the letter with no point associated, and you can classify your plane as plane P. Or you could take any 3 given points that are located within the plane itself, like A, B, and C, and call it plane A, B, C. Collinear points. Okay. Collinear points are points that lie on the same line. Points that lie on the same line. So if you notice in this given plane here, I have several lines. I see line AB, I see line GH, and I see line CD. So an example of collinear points would be points that are on the same lines. For example, point A and point B. Point G and point H. Or point C and point D. Those are examples of collinear points. Coplanar. Coplanar means they could be points or lines that are on the same plane. Notice co meaning with and planar meaning on the plane. Co meaning with, linear meaning on the line. So, an example of coplanar points is basically any point located within the plane, which happens to be all the points given. Okay? So your coplanar points, let's see if we can do this in a different color. Coplanar points are point A, point B, point C, point D, E, F, G, and H. So your coplanar points are all of them in this case. Points A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Those are your coplanar points. Now they also ask about coplanar lines. Well, coplanar lines are lines that are on the same plane. So we already know that. Line AB line CD, and line GH. Okay. So, naming points, lines, and planes continued. What are two other ways to name line QT? Notice QT is here, but that line extends all the way this way. There's a few different ways to classify this. The first one would be to choose the non-distinct point or letter that doesn't have a point. Okay, this letter M does not have a point. Line M. Another way to name this line QT is to look at what other points exist on that line. And I see Q and N also exist on that line. So I can call it QN. What are two other ways to name plane P? Well, plane P is right here. So it's this entire plane. And remember, on the previous page we had just gone over, you are allowed to take any 3 points within a plane to name it. So take any 3 points you see. So for example, I'm going to take RVS and I'm going to call it plane RVS. Now, they want another way to name it. So maybe I'll take VQ and S. Okay, so if you're naming a plane, you can use the distinct letter they provided or choose any 3 points on the plane that you see. What are the names of 3 collinear points? Collinear meaning on the same line. So if I take this given line here, line RQS, what are collinear points on that line? Point R and Q, points Q and S, and also points R and S. Those are collinear points all on that highlighted line. What are the names of 4 coplanar points? Well, coplanar points mean they all exist within the plane, and I see 4 of them right here. points R, Q, S, and V. Okay, we're going to continue these questions. It says, what are two other ways to name line RS? Well, if you notice, what else can we call this? I see R and Q, so we can name it RQ, or line RQ. We can also call it line QS. Now, this is in combination to the last page. What are two more ways to name plane P? Well, we called it plane RVS and VQS, but there's other ways that we can call it too. I can call it RVQ, and we could also call it plane SQV. Again, you're just picking any 4 points to identify the plane. What are the names of 3 other collinear points? So if we take a look, we have points R and Q, points Q and S, and points S and R and S, right, from right here. So that was because we took collinear points on this line. So at this time, let's use a different line for collinear points. I'm going to use this line. Collinear points would be points T and Q, points Q and N, and points T and N. Those are all collinear points. What are 2 points that are not coplanar with points R, S, and V, meaning they do not exist on the same plane as those 3 points? Well, the only ones I see that are not within that plane are points T and point N. Okay. We have some more vocabulary terms. Again, feel free to pause when you're doing your images, writing your definitions and naming your definitions, or naming your images, I should say. Segment, part of a line that consists of 2 endpoints. A line segment would look just like this. Notice that there are no arrows continuing in both directions because that would be a line. This is a line segment, meaning it stops on both sides. How would you name this line segment? There's a few ways to name it. We can name it segment AB. Notice there's just a line above with no arrows. Or you could call it line BA. A ray is a part of a line with a start point but no end point. And what that means is half of your ray is a segment and the other half of your ray is a line with an arrow that trends in one direction forever and ever and ever. So how can I name this ray? Well, there's only one way to do this. This would be ray AB. Notice how there is no arrow on the A side because A comes to a stop. But there is an arrow on the B side because B continues to trend infinitely in that direction. Opposite rays are 2 rays that share the same endpoint. Okay, now this is a unique concept, and when you draw opposite rays, it looks like this. 3 points with arrows trending in both directions. Now, if you were to look at this, you would say, well, this looks a lot like a line. And that's true because opposite rays form a line. The endpoint that is being shared, okay, they share the same endpoint. In this case, that would be point C. Now, C is in the middle of this line, so when you try to visualize it, you say, well, how is that an endpoint? Because remember, this is two rays, meaning that ray AC and ray CB are two distinct rays, an endpoint and then an arrow, an endpoint and an arrow. And visually, now that they're combined, they create a line. So we can name this either ray, we name these opposite rays ray CA and CB. Okay, you write them together, CA and CB. Okay, so we have a new example right here. And this is exactly what we just looked at. It's an example of opposite rays. What are the names of the three segments in the figure in the top right? Well, remember, segments, they end with distinct endpoints. No arrows, no continuations. So the first segment or line segment I see is DE. So remember, you write it D, E, and you put a line above with no arrows. The second segment I see is EF. And the third segment I see is DF. Notice I'm only writing the endpoints. Whoops. As I say it, I don't write the endpoint. DF. You do not need to write the E in the middle of those. What are the names of the rays in the figure at the top? So remember, a ray has an endpoint and then an arrow, meaning it continues. Okay, so the first one I see is ray ED. And remember, you point your arrow in the direction that it trends, so ED. The next one I see is EF, continued. EF, trending in the direction of F because that's where it continues infinitely. And what other rays do we have here? I see ray FD. And I also see ray DF. It says, which of the rays in the question above are opposite rays? So which of these four rays have a point where they meet in the middle? And that would be ray ED and ray EF. Those combine to make a line. So ED and EF. And they share that endpoint of E. Okay? Your final activity that you can do independently, and feel free to pause it, may be something that looks semi-familiar to you guys. So if you notice, okay, the name of this plane, and it's something that might be familiar to you, this is the map from Fortnite. Okay, I know some of you may like Fortnite, some of you may not. This is a nice visual representation. Plane Z. Notice I've classified it as plane Z. You can also see Z right here. Plane Z, okay, is the entire island on this map. Okay, that is your plane. Right here. You can see me following it along a little bit with that yellow highlighter. Okay, anything outside of that island is not within plane Z. there are many questions on the next page that you'll go back and forth and answer, okay, pertaining to the map. The first one says, what is the name of the ray, number 1, created by the battle bus? Well, I see the battle bus in the bottom corner here. Right down here. And that ray that is created, I see A, and it extends all the way through B, and it keeps going. Okay, so I'm going to call this ray AB. Remember, an arrow only on one side. Name 3 sets of collinear points. Collinear points, feel free to go back to your definition, are points that lie on the same line. So, I see several examples of lines. Line GF, okay, line ECL, line DA, so collinear points, I'm going to use FG, EC, and CL. So FG, E and C, and G and L, or C and L, I should say. C, L. Okay, so there are collinear points, points that exist on the same line. Just try and neaten this up after erasing it. There we go. Your next question says, name 5 coplanar points. Well, coplanar points are points that exist on the same plane. So any points that exist on this island. So we need 5 of them. Well, what if I just stuck to, let's see, does any color show up a little better? G, H, so F, G, H, I, J. Those are all on the same plane on the island. Right now, realistically, we could pick many of these points, but I'm going to use those 5. F, G, H, I, J. Identify 2 rays on plane Z. Remember, rays have an endpoint and they trend in one direction, and one direction only. The first ray that I see, and this is a little visually better on your worksheet, is I see a point J extending all the way through point I, and it has an arrow on the end. So ray JI is the first one I see. JI with an arrow above it. I'm going to look for another ray, and the next ray that I see is a point at O with a line extending through K and an arrow. So ray OK. Number 5 says identify 2 other names of plane Z. Well, plane Z, we could pick any 3 points on plane Z to rename it. So we could choose A, D, C. And realistically, you could pick any of the points within the island. So what about plane HOP? HOP. Identify the pair of opposite rays. Opposite rays. So when you're looking for opposite rays, you're looking for a line that has 3 points. And I think we've already discussed it. We have E, C, L. That is a horrible highlighter color. ECL. So the 2 rays that combine to create line ECL or line EL is CE, this ray right here, and ray CL. So ray CE and ray CL. Oops, CL. Identify two lines on plane Z. Well, two lines that combine or extend in both directions forever and ever and ever, the ones I see are FG and the one we keep talking about, EL. Oops, I'm writing them in the wrong spot. FG and EL. Identify the line segments on plane Z, meaning they have two distinct endpoints and they do not continue forever and ever and ever in the directions. Okay, the segments that I see, meaning they have no arrows on their lines, would be DA, right here, DA. And what else? Do we have another? That may be it. I think we just have DA. What points are not within plane Z? Well, remember, plane Z is the island itself. So what points are not within that plane? And that would be point N, point M, and point A. What connects Haunted Hills and Snobby Shores? Well, if you take a look here, you take a look at your map and we're trying to figure out where Haunted Hills and Snobby Shores is if you are unfamiliar with the map itself. I see Haunted Hills here and Snobby Shores here. And what is connecting them? Looks like points G and point F, but they have arrows trending on the ends, which means it's a line. So line GF. What connects Lonely Lodge and Tomato Town? Well, I see Tomato Town here, Lonely Lodge here. That is segment AD. Okay. Your exit slip says, what are two other ways to name line EF? Here's line EF. Jot down a way that you can rename line EF. Next question says, what are two other ways to name plane C? Excuse me. You have plane C here. Remember, you could choose any 3 points within the plane to rename it. Name 3 collinear points, meaning they exist on the same line. Feel free to identify 3 collinear points. Name 4 coplanar points, meaning the same plane. Points that exist on the same plane. Feel free to write those down. Okay, remember this is your exit slip, so I won't be posting the answers here, and I look forward to seeing your responses when you submit your work. Do not forget to submit using email, Google Voice, or Smart Learning Suite.